Hey, what's going on guys, Extra here and welcome to the Classic WRATH Retribution Paladin PvE guide. This video is made for phase 1 and I'll try to make an update video on changes that must be made in your playstyle and gear in each phase, so make sure to subscribe to my channel not to miss those out. I'm making Retribution content for the whole Classic WRATH expansion if you're into the content, and please don't forget to like this video. Thank you very much. And just wanted to say that since I'm making a complete guide, the video may be a bit long, but you can mouse over the timeline and select which part you want to watch. So as you may know, Red Paladins has changed so much from TBC and now it's way more fun and easier to play. You got a brand new ability called Divine Storm, which is one of your main strong abilities both in AOE and single target damage. You no longer have to seal twist for more damage, and instead you can have your seals up for almost 30 minutes. Exorcism can now be used on any target, but if it's used on the undead and demons, it'll land a critical hit, which is great cause almost 70% of dungeons and raids in Wrath are undeads and demons. Retribution now is much better in doing cleave damage thanks to Seal of Command, Divine Storm, Holy Wrath and Consecration. This one is not only for paladins, but now we got Glyphs, which enhance our abilities, and Red Paladin is one of these specs that has a strong damage glyphs, including Glyph of Holy Wrath, which reduces cooldown of your Holy Wrath ability to half, and that is what makes Ret a beast when cleaving down undeads in dungeons, as well as other glyphs including Glyph of Judgement, Glyph of Consecration or Exorcism and much more. So what's the best race for Retribution Paladin? It depends if you're playing Horde or the Alliance. If you're on Horde side, your only option will be Blood Elf, which is not weak at all. You have Arcane Torrent, which silences all nearby enemies for 2 seconds if they're players and 3 seconds if there are non-players. And you got Magic Resistance, which makes you to have a 2% chance not to get hit by spells. On the Alliance, your best choice is Human. Humans have 3 additional expertise when holding two-handed swords or maces, which is so good, and they got Diplomacy, which hands down is the strongest passive you can have early in the game when grinding reputation. You are 10% faster in getting reputation, and that's awesome. Additionally, you got Every Man for Himself, which is a 2-minute PvP trinket that frees you from any kind of crowd control, which can be used in some situations even in PvE fights, and you got also 3% additional spirit as a human, and all of these make me say humans are the best Red Paladin race both in PvE and PvP. There's also 2 other options that are Dwarves or the Draenei. Dwarves have 2 more expertise than human when only holding two-handed maces, not swords, and they got 2% chance to resist frost damage and the Stormform ability, which makes you take 10% less damage for 10 seconds and remove all your debuffs. Draenei has an ability that heals you for a percentage of your attack power for 15 seconds, and they also bring a 1% additional hit rating buff to the party members. That is so good, but I still think humans are the best race for Red Paladin in general. So the stat priority for Retribution Paladin should look like this: 8% hit rating, 28 expertise on single target, and by the way 10 expertise can be brought from Glyph of Seal of Vengeance, and 3 if you're a human holding swords or maces. Then strength, critical strike, agility, haste rating, which helps your Seal of Vengeance stacking and Seal of Command procs on faster auto attacks, and completely ignore armor penetration as it doesn't work for Retribution. These items will be explained in another video, which will be posted in a few days, but I'll explain these enchants, sockets, and Libram in this one. The meta socket you should be using is 21 crit plus 3% increased critical damage, and to activate this meta socket you gotta use 2 blue sockets, green or purple also may work, and the best one though might be 10 strength plus 15 stamina purple socket. And in all other sockets you gotta use 20 plus strength red socket, and if you're willing to activate your socket bonuses too, I suggest you to use 10 strength, 10 critical, or the 10 strength, 10 hit rating orange socket for yellow sockets based on the stat you're missing the most. And these are the beast enchants in case you're not missing the hit rating and expertise cap. This is a list of beast enchants you should be using, and almost 3 enchants need you to have engineering and tailoring professions. First one is the Sword Guard Embroidery, which has a chance to increase your attack power by 400 for 15 seconds. And the 2 other ones are the Hyperspeed Acceleration from Engineering on Gloves, which has a 1-minute cooldown and grants you 340 haste rating for 12 seconds. Last one is a Nitro Boost, which you all know what it does, and it also gives you 24 critical strike rating, and since Red has limited mobility, this enchant is a must have. So if you're trying to min-max, these 2 should be your professions. Your best Libram in phase 1 is Deadly Gladiator's Libram of Fortitude, which grants you 120 attack power for 10 seconds on each Crusader strike. This Libram requires 1930 arena rating. If you can't get your hands on it, then these two are your other options, one for single target and the other one for cleave damage. So there's a talent template you can just copy, which is the one you're just watching, and these are a couple of options you can have with your 2 remaining points. You can choose improved lay on hands when combined with minor lay on hands glyph, which results in reducing lay on hands cooldown to 11 minutes, and whoever gets healed by it will have 20% reduced damage taken for 15 seconds. If you're more of a support person in raids or 5-man parties, you can go like this, or also if you just don't feel like it and just want not to fall behind because of Ret's limited mobility, you can just choose Pursuit of Justice instead to increase your movement and mount movement speed by 15%. Majority of Red players usually find this talent more entertaining than lay on hands, but as I said, it's an option you can decide to have or not. There's another option which is situational, and that happens when you have a second Red Pally in your raid, and the option is not taking Improved Blessing of Might. So now you can remove 2 points from Improved Blessing of Might and spend them on Pursuit of Justice or Improved Lay on Hands. Keep in mind that when you take Improved Blessing of Might, you should be prioritized to only give Might to your party, cause it's stronger than the usual one. There's also something I must clarify, and that is about Vindication talent. There's a myth that says it reduces raid bosses attack power, and that is absolutely not true. This talent doesn't work on raid bosses, but it does work on elite mobs, which are also called trash. So you better not waste a single point on this when raiding. So what glyphs should be used? There are 2 minor glyphs that you have to use, and those are Sense Undead and the Lay on Hands. First one increases your damage against the undead, while your Sense Undead is active by 1%. Glyph of Lay on Hand combined with improved Lay on Hands, so you can have its cooldown reduced to 11 minutes. Third minor I suggest you to have is the Glyph of Blessing of Might, and the last one is just optional. You can pretty have anything, but this one helps you in solo content. Default major glyph you should be using is Glyph of Judgement. It's just a solid 10% damage buff to your Judgement, and for the next 2 glyphs it really depends, but you should be using Glyph of Seal of Vengeance and Consecration. This one gets you 10 expertise and is a must have on single target if you don't have expertise cap. If you have, which is kinda impossible, or you don't care about it, then you can replace it with Glyph of Exorcism in single target or Glyph of Holy Wrath in AOE against the undead. And Glyph of Consecration is just a solid 20% buff to your Consecration, as well as helping your mana and rotation. So before going into the in-depth rotation explanation, let's talk about your seals. The only seal you'll be using in AoE fights is Seal of Command. This seal deals holy damage up to 2 additional nearby targets every time you do an auto attack, Crusader Strike or Divine Storm. That's why haste rating helps your cleave damage. Faster melee swings proc Seal of Command much more often, that results in higher cleave damage. In single boss fights, you should be using Seal of Vengeance since it's the strongest. Every melee hit has a chance to apply a holy dot that stacks up to 5 times, and each of them add 10% to the dot damage. If you get 5 stacks, then every single of your auto attacks deal extra 38% of your attack power. Some people say Seal of Righteousness is better than Seal of Vengeance, but that is not true. The truth is, Seal of Righteousness only is better in fights that last only 20 to 30 seconds, where you can burst down the boss when your wings go down as well. If the fight lasts long, none of your seals can compete to Seal of Vengeance on a single target. So guess what? We've reached best part of the guide, the rotation. For newcomer Reds in Wrath, rotation is just like first come first serve, and they just try to use anything that comes off cooldown. But there's a priority list for sure. For single target you should be using Seal of Vengeance if boss fight lasts longer than 30 to 35 seconds, otherwise you should be using Seal of Righteousness. And the priority list is Judgement, Crusader Strike, Divine Storm, Consecration, Exorcism. And here's a few tips from me. Crusader Strike is being prior because of Deadly Gladiator's Libram of Fortitude, which grants you 120 attack power on every Crusader Strike. It requires 1930 rating in Arena, so if you can't get your hands on this relic, then Crusader Strike should be used after Divine Storm or even Consecration. Second one is that in execution phase, when you can fit Hammer of Wrath in your rotation, it should have the highest priority. And the last one, since in phase 1, Nextramon's bosses and trash are all undead, your Exorcism will always land a critical hit, so you should be doing almost 8 or 9 critical hits on Avenging Wrath using Exorcism. And that's not a thing you can disregard. So when fighting the undead, in my opinion, Exorcism procs on Wings should be used immediately rather than having the least priority. And there's a priority list for AOE 2. Crusader strike first in the opener for attack power from Libram. If you don't have the Libram, otherwise Divine Storm, Crusader strike, Consecration, Judgement for mana, Hammer of Wrath, Exorcism, and if you're fighting the undead, you have to press Holy Wrath on cooldown, preferably after Crusader strike with the attack power buff. Don't forget you can always pop Avenging Wrath Trinket and Haste Potion for higher burst. And here's my 3 tips on the AOE rotation. First, don't forget that this is not the actual rotation, it's just a priority list, which means, for example, if you've reached the point that you can Exorcism and you get Divine Storm back up in the same exact global, you have to choose Divine Storm. Second tip, since Retribution Paladin gets a lot of aggro, don't start early on the pack with a big Divine Storm since you may get aggro. Just try to use smaller attacks including Crusader strike for attack power buff or Consecration, then start blasting. And the last tip that comes with the second one is that if tank is pulling a pack from far away and wants to snap them around the corner using line of sight, you can actually precast a Consecration, so you can save a global and have extra damage on your burst without spending a global on Consecration while on Avenging Wrath. So why should Ret be chosen in a raid composition or in a 5-man party? I'll tell you now. Buff-wise, Retribution has a variety of buffs when it comes to buffing. 687 attack power if talented, 10% increased all stats, and 92 mana per 5 seconds. Reds give 3% increased damage done to the whole raid using their aura, and also your aura increases everyone's casting, melee, and ranged attack speed by 3%. Ret also increases their target's chance to take additional critical strike damage by 3% using Judgement. Speaking of Judgement, Ret can also use Judgement of Light to help teammates heal themselves by hitting the Judgement target, or they can also use Judgement of Wisdom to help them get mana every time they hit the target. And when any of your Judgments are used, they give 10 raid members a buff that is also known as Mana Replenishment that gives 1% of their mana every 5 seconds. So these are the buffs Retribution can bring to a raid or party. And performance-wise, Reds do great burst damage in medium pools and can do insane AoE damage when fighting the undead thanks to Holy Wrath, Divine Storm, and Consecration. Retribution is among one of the best specs that has high consistent damage in Wrath of the Lich King. Not only because of the damage, but because you can do great off heals and you have tons of utility for a raid. You have a strong raid-wide defensive called Aura Mastery, which doubles the effectiveness of your auras for a few seconds. Leon Hand not only is a great off heal that saves a tank from dying, but also reduces their damage taken for 20% if talented. Turn Evil to fear the undead. Cleanse Toxins can dispel almost everything except Curse. Holy Wrath is a massive stun to the undead. You got multiple aura buffs. Freedom, which removes any immobilization. Blessing of Protection or buff to save people from dying. Divine Intervention, so you can ank a healer, so when you're about to wipe, you can save whole raid's precious time not running to the boss for minutes. Hammer of Justice, which has the highest stun duration in the game, same as Kidney Shot. Hand of Sacrifice gives defensive to an ally. Hand of Salvation reduces an ally's threat over time for 10 seconds. And you have the ability to taunt as Retribution, and this sometimes comes in handy where the off tank dies and your raid just needs a taunt from someone so you can save the main tank and just finish the boss off. When it comes to macros, Red Paladins are the ones who can customize their utilities using macros. Most simple one you can do is not to target the one you're using utility or off heals on, using their name or party 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can use mouseover, so it works like whoever you mouseover on will be your spell's target. You can create these kind of macros for all of your utility spells and off heals, and the advantage is if you don't change your target to a friendly, your character won't stop attacking and you'll not lose DPS. Not only that, but also you won't spend time trying to target your last target after. The second one is about Avenging Wrath. I see a lot of players having 2 keybinds for their offensive CDs and the unused Trinket, which has the same cooldown. What's the point of doing this? Well, you're losing 1 or 2 globals, and to be honest, that's a huge DPS loss. Simply macro all of them together and also add a global consuming spell at the end. Most of the offensive CDs and unused trinkets don't spend a global, so if you can actually try to use them in a macro, you won't see any of your spells going into cooldown for a second, which we call it global, which means you can add, for example, a Judgement to your offensive macro, and this way you can start damaging from the very beginning of the fight and also spend the first global. There's also a macro that is called one button that a lot of you guys have maybe heard of it. It actually allows you to prioritize your spells only using a single button, and I'm not trying to say it's bad or good, so I copied and tried it to figure out if it's useful or not, and to be honest, it does feel good to use this macro, but it's not perfect. Sometimes a higher prior spell is ready and it continues the rotation, and additionally it's just a macro that mimics the priority. What if suddenly boss fight turns into an AOE fight? Or what if you're told to stop padding and only focus the boss? It's just a macro and you're a human. You can think and decide what spell has higher priority at the moment. After all, I'm not convincing you not to use it. Here's a macro for single target, for sure it's usable, but I'm pretty sure if these macros go viral and everyone uses them, Blizzard won't allow us to use sequence macros anymore, cause this macro is also made for other specs too, but until then it's usable. By the way, all of these macros are available in the description below. And here's a few retribution tips from me in Wrath of the Lich King. Don't forget to prioritize Exorcism and Holy Wrath against the undead, it just pumps your DPS. Make sure to build 5 stacks of Vengeance on single target before popping CDs. Make sure to give yourself Blessing of Salvation right before you're about to pop off with full potential of bursting in big pulls. Don't forget to use your Sacred Shield on the tank if you ain't got a Holy Paladin, or on yourself if you got one. It's just one of the strongest defensives in Wrath. Don't waste your time when out of damaging globals, just reapply Sacred Shield, make use of your Blessing of Salvation and other stuff. Don't ever watch the screen when you don't have anything to press for 3 seconds. Try to use your Hodge more often, especially on the mobs that are more dangerous for your tank. One of the big differences between good and bad red paladins are the one that uses Hodge and the other one that doesn't, even in dungeons. Most of red paladins forget they have an ability called Lay on Hands. To use this more often and more frequently, make this macro and put it in your spell bars and pass the team leadership to your tank. Whenever a tank calls out for help, just press it without targeting him. Not only you save him from dying, but also he will take 20% less damage for 15 seconds if you're talented. Don't count Consecration as a small thing, especially in single target. In Wrath, Consecration deals the most damage comparing to all other expansions. If you're not doing so, don't hesitate feeding Divine Plea in your rotation, as you may run out of mana more frequently. Just use it on cooldown when you run out of damage buttons. And the last tip is, when you know you're getting damage in a few seconds and you want to help your healer, don't use Divine Shield if you got Divine Protection up. Divine Shield causes you to deal half damage for the whole duration and is not your best option when trying to mitigate the damage, unless you're getting one shot. Instead, use Divine Protection, which reduces your damage taken by 50% for 12 seconds, and not only it mitigates the damage but also doesn't reduce your damage by half, and it's one of the strongest damage mitigation defensives in the game. You won't ever have this in any other expansions. So that was it. Hope you guys enjoyed watching and made use of the guide. If you've got any kind of questions about anything, just feel free to drop a comment, and thank you so much for spending your precious time watching and hearing me out. If you think the guide was worth it and useful, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you do so, I'd appreciate it. By the way, as I said, I'm making Retribution content for the entire duration of Wrath expansion, so if you're a Retribution Paladin, make sure to follow the channel. I will post phase 1 Retribution Paladin base items in a few days, and make sure to check that out. Thank you again, and I'll catch you in the next one.